Welcome back to the Delta Learning Podcast, where we explore the ideas redefining what great sales performance looks like today. And this episode is a special one. After 8 brilliant conversations, we're closing out Series 3 with a guest who sits right at the intersection of learning, leadership, and commercial impact. Today, we're joined by Lee Harvey, Senior Revenue Enablement Manager at Trust Payments, one of the UK's leading fintech company shaping the future of digital commerce. Trust Payments helps businesses of all sizes connect payments, technology, and customer experience into one seamless ecosystem. Lee's career spans commercial learning and development, leadership and business development, and now revenue enablement. He's led transformational sales capability programs, coached teams across multiple sectors, and built a reputation for combining behavioral insight, data, and human-centered design to unlock performance. His passion, helping people maximize their potential in a way that drives both business results and personal growth. In this final episode of the series, we sit down with Lee to explore what sales enablement really looks like inside a fast-growing fintech, the gap between traditional learning and development approaches and what today's commercial teams actually need, and why practice-rich experiential learning environments accelerate performance. It's an insightful, practical, and energizing conversation to round off our 2025 series and the perfect way to wrap up Series 3 of the Delta Learning Podcast. We hope you enjoy our final conversation of the season featuring Lee Harvey, Senior Revenue Enablement Manager at Trust Payments. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to our latest podcast. I'm really pleased to have Lee Harvey of Trust Payments here with us for this final podcast of the year. Lee, over to you. Just a quick introduction, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so Steve, as you said, my name's Lee Harvey. I work currently at Trust Payments, been there for coming up for 5 years, 5 years now. Prior to that, worked for WorldPay, so another fintech. Also worked for Orange and for Zurich Financial Services way back in the day. Also, plus a stint in an Amazon warehouse too during COVID. And obviously, Steve, you and I have known each other for coming on for 10 years now. I guess it must be close to that, mustn't it?
Easily 10 years, indeed. Yeah. So thank you for finally 10 years after we first met, joining us for a podcast.
Yeah.
And I've got some particularly tough questions for you, as I know you so well. The first one's not so tough. So, your career spanned learning and development, leadership development, and now you've moved over to sales enablement. If you cast your mind back, what first drew you into that world of learning and development, and how has that foundation shaped how you approach enablement today?
So I guess it was a bit of a sliding doors for me, and probably a bit like sales, where nobody chooses to go into sales. It's not a subtopic or one of the things that you choose when you're sort of doing your careers choices at school. Training, I think, or learning and development feels quite similar to that, unless those people who really see it as as a vocation, as a purpose for their life. So for me, as I said, I started at Zurich Financial Services, worked with a couple of different departments there. So that was the beginning of my career. Worked my way up through to managing a department of around 100 people, which I really enjoyed. I'd recruited most of those people or managed them, so I really enjoyed leadership and management of that team. And then I moved across and got asked to look after their new business function. So that was kind of my first real, introduction to sales and working with salespeople. I really enjoyed it. But redundancy came up for the first time in my career, and I fancied a complete change. So I became a project manager at Orange. Never done that before, but I fancied working, liked the look of the brand, and became a project manager there. And I worked my way up to a senior program manager. And that's when I was asked to manage this CRM program. And I realized that, one, I didn't know anything and was not interested in CRMs at all. And program management really wasn't the thing for me. So I just wasn't enjoying it. But what I was enjoying at the time, I'd grown up all my life going to church. So my parents had joined the church when I was 4 years old. And by then I was I was asked to teach a Bible study class on a Sunday. And I really enjoyed it. I loved actually standing up in front of a group of people. I loved the study of it. I loved then sharing that. I'd seen some really good people who had done it previously and borrowed bits from them. So that was what really got me interested. I thought, well, maybe I'm just not in the right career for me. At the same time, a colleague of mine, his girlfriend worked for the Yorkshire Tourist Board, and they were they wanted to do some project management training, but didn't have much cash to do it. And he said, would I be willing to go and run a 1-day training course for them? And designed it, delivered it. They really enjoyed it. I thought, all right, okay, so what I've got here is something that's actually transferable. I can make a career out of it. Came back to work. I was very fortunate. Somebody I worked with was the head of trials and training. I knew them very well. I asked them what I needed to do to prepare for a role in their team, and they said they had a vacancy there and then. So I moved across into product training. Did that for a while, and a number of different managers, and then the person who was the head of sales training at Orange resigned. Somebody else was due to come in 3 weeks after they'd left, so I was asked to caretake their sales training function. But actually, that person then didn't start, so I caretook it for a year. So I had roughly 50 people reporting to me they dealt with either retail or corporate or telesales, so different functions. And again, absolutely love the connection I had with with the sales teams and designing and delivering sales training. So that's where I started really finding my passion for it. Redundancy reared its head again. And so I left and then worked freelance for a while, and actually went and worked for a training company, a small training company, for a couple of years. And that was a real education for me, because I thought I was really good at training until I worked in a business where you've got to do it for a living. People are paying you for it. And so I learned a lot again from working in that environment. But not only was I training, I was also, because it was a small business, we were all responsible for going and winning and building business. So I really enjoyed, again, working with new customers, working with existing customers, spotting opportunities to cross-sell and upsell the services that we offered. So it was quite a hybrid role, and it was really enjoyable. Again, redundancy happened there. There's a theme here, isn't there? And I ended up, again, working freelance and then working as a consultant for WorldPay, who were one of the clients of this training company. And that then turned into a full-time role. And so I was looking after initially building and delivering sales training programs for WorldPay, and then was asked if I would take on all of their training for the UK, so the operations as well. It seemed a great opportunity to do that. And that's where we met. So that was about the time that we met, when I took over that, and you were one of the providers of training for the business. So that's how our sort of working relationship and friendship began. So yeah, so quite a few changes. I did that. There was then redundancy for a fourth time. And then I went freelance. And again, you and I were working, we were, I guess, finding a real rhythm to what we were doing. And then COVID hit and destroyed my sort of my diary, emptied in days. So I had to do something. So I went and worked in an Amazon warehouse for a few months, and then did 3 months of lead generation for somebody, which I absolutely hated. Kudos to anybody who does that sort of work, because I was good at it, but I hated it. And so consequently, I decided not to be very good at it, so that I could get out. And then the opportunity came up. Somebody that I had trained when I was at WorldPay, who had a senior role in Trust Payments. They contacted me and said, would I be interested in coming and join them? I had a 10-minute interview with their chief commercial officer. With 9 minutes was him telling me how great the company was. And that's what started my journey at Trust. Whilst I was here, I had various roles, but I said to the business, they said to a new chief commercial officer, that I think you really need somebody to look at sales enablement. Operationally, it's in a bit of a mess in terms of processes and systems, training, tools and everything else like that. And that role was created, and then they left. A new person came in, and they poached me from HR back into commercial to take on this sales enablement role. And that's kind of where I am today. So.
Very good, thank you. And the second part of the question was just in terms of how all those experiences have shaped your approach to this latest role around sales enablement.
I think the thing for me is I was considering this, and you know me, I like things in threes. So there were three things that really stood out to me. That what do salespeople need to be successful? And for me, it's a simple set of processes to follow. They've got great sales techniques to apply on top of their personality, and they've got excellent tools and collateral to support them in those. So for me, that's what I've learned over that period of time to make things successful, help a sales team to be successful, and that's very much why this role was created, specifically with me in mind. I found out afterwards. So yeah.
And I mean, there are many different definitions of sales enablement in different organizations. What if you were to define it for you within Trust Payments, what does that look like?
I can give you a very specific defined answer for that one, because I helped to write the job description for this role.
Okay.
And what that is, so my role is responsible for developing and implementing strategies, tools, and resources that enhance the effectiveness of the sales part of the organisation. And it's seen very much as the role is a gap, bridges the gap between sales, marketing, and the product teams. So have we got? Are we sourcing or building the right products and services that our salespeople can sell? Are we marketing them effectively? And then are we giving our salespeople the skills and the tools and the collateral they need to be able to go and maximise those opportunities? So, and for a business like Trust that moves really fast, it's those things again that I said before. It's helping our salespeople really to be able to identify and communicate to our customers and partners what makes us different. We're what's called a tier 2 acquirer. So we're not a world payer or global payments. We're not one of the biggest ones out there. And so it's what makes us different from the bigger beasts that are in the jungle that we live in. And that again is about giving them easy to follow and effective tools and techniques so that they can win business and retain customers, and keep the admin as easy and as light as possible for them. So they're focusing the majority of their time on winning and retaining business.
And in terms of learning and development, both of us have seen many changes over the last 2 decades at least. What changes have you observed in terms of how organizations are approaching learning and development?
I think the biggest one for me, and it's probably no surprise to hear this, is COVID. COVID absolutely forced, I think it accelerated. I think it was going to happen, but it's accelerated a move to remote working. And whilst we're seeing some businesses insist on people coming back to work, we're certainly in an organisation for us that doesn't want to do that, doesn't intend to do that. But also, I think a combination of COVID and that move to remote working, but also the fact that we consume information through social media now, so it's shorter chunks of information that we're looking to our attention span. Like you, but if it hasn't hooked me in the first 3 or 4 seconds, then I'm going to move on to the next thing. And I think that's meant that we need to have more choice in how people learn, shorter, more remote learning, particularly things like workshops. That change has made it tougher to convince learners that they should travel, where in the past they would have been quite happy or just accepted that they needed to be in an office to attend a workshop. Now it's become much tougher to convince people that they should be. That's where they're expected to attend. Occasionally, we do have to sort of roll out the terms and conditions of their employment to tell them, no, you will, just because you live nowhere near our office, you do need to occasionally come to one of our offices. But that convincing them to come, but also it's made it easier, in the flip side to that, to schedule online sessions, and people are more willing to attend online sessions, but they need to be shorter. They need to be punctual. So in my opinion, I think we're still in the early stages of cracking that. Because one of the big challenges when it's remote working is making sure that people are still engaged and paying attention to what it is you're talking about or what you want them to cover. So I think it's that remote working and social learning is the 2 biggest things that I've seen change.
Thank you. And where do you see the biggest gaps between, some of those more traditional learning and development approaches and what commercial teams actually need to be successful?
I would say that in the past, it's been very much, I think, seen as and probably behaved as L&D done to. So learning and development has been responsible for training, and therefore it puts out training programs and people are expected to attend them. And there's not really much sort of follow up on those. For me, I think there's a real light bulb moment in our business a few months ago where we'd seen a real drop in the attendance at training sessions that we were providing for the business. And this is across everywhere, multiple subjects, not just in commercial teams. And in trying to understand that and what was going on, I came across some research that had been done by Udemy, and it was about learning profiles, and looked at these 5 different profiles. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but the one that stood out to me as my own perspective is a devoted learner. So I come out very strongly as a devoted learner. That's somebody who loves to learn for the sake of learning. So for me, if there's training that's available and it's of a topic I might be interested in, I'm probably going to pitch up and attend and want to get involved, as opposed to, say, people who learn from a career perspective. They can see it enhances their career, or people who need to learn because they need to learn that to be able to do their job. They can't do it without it. So what they call a practical learner. So from that, thinking about that, when I took on this sales enablement role, I was really determined to put learning where the learner is. So rather than forcing them to learn in the traditional way, you need to attend this workshop, or you need to do this e-learning that's going to take you 25 minutes to do, and you're probably just going to sit there hitting the forward button on it to get through it as quickly as possible. So for me, that's meant developing different ways to access content. So things like microlearns. So very much now we've got, I love Articulate Rise because it makes it very easy to create content very, very quickly. It's only perhaps going to be 10, there's 10 pages of content, visually appealing, considering different learning styles, but things like microlearns, coaching has become a massive thing in our organization. It's keeping me very busy. The majority of those people that I work with in the business, I work across the whole business from a coaching perspective, but the majority of them are people from sales. And again, it's about that sort of coaching stroke mentoring role that we provide for them. So giving people that personalized learning, but also we've just been talking about introducing deal clinics as a way, and that's something that's really starting in terms of the interest from the management trust payments. There's a huge amount of interest in that because it's people working on real life. It's not a scenario. It's actually one of their pieces of work that they're working on, and that's certainly gaining traction too. I still think there's a place for some of the more traditional training methods, like skills workshops. I don't think you can really. I'll talk to sales managers and say, well, do you people know what they should know? Can they do what they should do, and can they do that can they repeat that in the real world? Now, knowledge we can test. We can get them to practice doing something in a classroom environment or a remote environment, but actually getting them to really practice in the real world and getting feedback on that's the bit that I don't think we can replace that with a lot of with other tools. There's no substitute for that practice.
So I was hearing quite a few different themes come out there, Lee. That idea that shorter bite-size chunks of learning is becoming more attractive for people. People want to learn where they are, not necessarily travel to where you want them to be for learning.
Yeah.
The importance of personalizing through coaching support, and then that ability to practice and demonstrate that you can apply the learning and take that into real life scenarios. Well, that's our plan for 2026. That's how we're going to design all our programs.
Good to hear. I'd expect nothing less.
As a result of this conversation. In terms of enablement, it's becoming increasingly data-driven. How are you using metrics or behavioral insights or competency frameworks, to shape some of the interventions you're having with the team? So
I'm really fortunate that when my role was created, there was a role that was created alongside it, which was revenue analytics. And so the person, Matt, in our business, Matt and I have known each other for quite a few years within the business, have very similar thinking in terms of skills and processes and stuff like that. So he's looking at revenue analytics. So we're looking very closely at the moment at what's the state of the information that we've got about performance. So looking at our CRM system was poorly lacking in terms of the quality of the data that was going into it, and also the data that was available coming out of it. So Matt's done a huge amount of work with improving the reporting that we get from our CRM. That's really helped us to see where there are some gaps in behaviours. And it is probably think about the 4 disciplines of execution. So I know that you and I have sort of trained people on that and delivered that. But that piece about understanding what the game is, and making sure that actually we're breaking it down into what's the things that make the biggest difference, and rather than just focusing on results, that we're focusing on behaviours, because we strongly believe that the behaviours will lead to the results that we want. So there's far more focus now in the business on our people logging their the meetings that they're having. Are they logging the proposals that they're creating? How many of those they're doing? What's the quality of them? So we're looking far more at that to understand where, rather than asking people, whereas traditionally we might have said, ask people, how would you rate yourself in these areas? And we know from experience that salespeople tend to rate themselves highly. There is an optimism bias to sales. Their managers probably might not rate them as high, but still maybe rate them higher than they actually are. And then what you observe. And so very much is, well, the data doesn't lie. Yeah. You'll say, don't tell me that you've done 50 appointments this month, because the data doesn't say you did 50 appointments. So that's really helping us to get a better grip in the organization on what the behaviors are of our salespeople, and therefore, is it a process? Is it a tool? Is it a skill that we need to help them with to improve?
Very good. And are you seeing some of that come through in high levels of performance with the team?
Beginning to. It's a slow process. I started in this role in September, and they've been, as in any businesses, when you start, could you look at these? Could you put out these 3 or 4 fires for me? But we're seeing there's definitely better adherence at making sure that information is going into the system. And now we're getting that information. We're right at the beginning. So there's a couple of areas that we've spotted that could be improved, both either in terms of skill, and in terms of collateral that we can provide for our salespeople to help them. So giving them sort of a framework and a structure to work within.
And you spoke earlier about the benefits of coaching, the benefits of practice, that people get a chance to demonstrate that they can apply the skills that they've learned. It's a bit of a gratuitous question, because from our side of the podcast, we're all about trying to create experiential learning sessions. What would you pick out as the key benefits or differences between something that's a bit more experiential based and something that's a little bit more content heavy?
I think for me, there's no substitute for practice. That's the thing. You can share information with people as much as you like, but as I said, can they, not just do they know what they should know, but can they do what they should do? And for that, you need to get people into a situation where they give you the opportunity to see them practicing it, and you get the opportunity then to give them feedback. So certainly, I've always seen, strong believer in it, and I've seen the difference it's made to people's performance. I've had people tell me or come to me to say, could we practice this particular, I'm struggling in this area, can I come and practice it with you? Because I know we did that as part of an induction I did with them, or some other sales training that I've offered them. So definitely that, I think, is a big thing for me. One of the biggest surprises that I had when I began working in sales training was how much salespeople dislike role plays.
Yeah.
But I think they're incredibly useful. They might feel uncomfortable. I think a lot of that is because the environment that they're in. So when it is peer-to-peer practice, I just don't think that's as effective. It's cheap, but it's not effective for me. And I've always seen, and I'm a huge advocate for investing in using actors to remove some of the discomfort that there is of, I'm doing this with my peer and my boss is observing me, or one of my colleagues is observing me. And also I think they behave better as well. So the larking around sort of gets less, and they really get into the actor really helps them to get into the scenario they're in. So I think it's far more effective. So for me, experience-based learning is the most effective way of learning. As I said, deal clinics, I think, is another good one, because you're working on real stuff. So those things, it's actually talking about real things rather than a scenario that's been created that they know that's not true, and people spend too much time picking holes in the scenario rather than actually practicing the skills.
Yeah, I mean, in our world, the use of AI is increasing, some of which is really useful. I mean, creating realistic practice-based scenarios takes a tenth of the time, maybe not even that it used to. So that's useful. On the other side, I don't know if you've tried any of these conversational simulators, AI avatar based practice.
No, no, not yet. We've a couple of companies that we've spoken to where we're looking at a new learning management system, incorporated that into what they were doing. So we haven't tried it yet. I'm interested to see how it works and how, again, it's that cost versus benefit, isn't it? That
Mm.
yeah, we'd all probably much rather have a group of actors come in and play roles for us, but when there are limited budgets and limited time available. So I think still, my preference probably would still be to begin. If it's new stuff we're learning, if we're giving you this for the first time, I want it to be done as I'd rather invest the time and the money in making it real. But then I think when it comes to embedding it, it certainly has a place there, to embed the learning rather than introduce the learning.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a go at a couple of them. We're weighing up as part of our proposition whether um, that cost benefit stacks up on the side of AI. The couple that I've tried, one of the challenges you don't actually feel anything while you're practicing, which I think you do feel something when you're practicing with other humans.
Yeah,
So for as long as you have to sell to humans, if that is your sales environment, I think you are better practicing with humans.
yeah,
However, I'm keeping a close eye because if it gets to a level where I think the quality, surpasses that or gets closer to that of the human interaction, then we'll be a bit more forward with it. But at the
yeah.
moment,
And I'd agree.
human
I'd agree with that.
first. Yeah.
There was, in fact, another provider that we work with contacted me about using AI learning in their training, and they were talking about very much using it in the embedding of learning. So their proposition was still very much, let's start it with face to face. They're an actor-based company. They've done some really good stuff with us, but they were asking about what we thought about AI, and they asked the question, sort of, why would you still choose face to face? And for me, I put very clearly, it's the emotional content, the emotional connection to the content,
Yeah.
and to the activity that you're doing. You don't feel things in the same way as
Yeah.
you do. Yeah, you can get some of those feelings, but you don't feel it in the same way as you do when it's a live
Yeah.
situation, or as an actor led situation. Definitely.
And what have you learned about embedding learning habits, within busy commercial or sales teams? You've already spoken about that reduction in attention spans for learning. Um, and what are some of the barriers to that embedding piece?
So for me, there's a big piece around just repeat, repeat, repeat. I guess it's the Ebbinghaus curve of forgetting, isn't it? That bringing people in and doing training with them, I've seen it far too many times in my career, and the frustration of it. You bring people in, you do the learning, and then you go and observe them. And like, did you actually turn up to the training or not? Because it doesn't look like you've applied anything that we talked about. And that's clearly your fault, not my fault as the trainer that's happened. But for me, that's why any of the programs that I run, I start internally. Anything that I develop internally, it begins with the manager. For two reasons. One, because I want the manager's support for it. They need to get behind it to make sure that they're going to they're going to apply it. But most importantly, that they're able to do the things that I need them to do, not to be able to do the job, but they need to be able to coach somebody to be able to. So they need to spot the differences and be able to coach them to help them to do that. I'm one person in an organization. I can't be at every sales appointment to see what somebody does in real time and what they're doing in front of a customer, but the manager often is. So for me, the key there is getting the manager trained up to be able to embed it and motivated enough to make sure that happens. And then, like I said, so from then it's also about what am I doing before and afterwards. So introducing pre-learning and post-learning sort of refreshers. So I've got an induction that I'm running in January for new starters, and already talking to the manager about the follow-on sessions. So it's not just we will run an induction for 3 days. We'll run an induction for 3 days, but then we'll be having weekly 2-hour sessions for them to go through. Okay, well, what stuff have you learned? What have you experienced? What do we need to change? What do you need reminding of? What do you need more practice on to help you to embed this? How do we get these guys up to competence as quickly as possible? And it's always through the embedding.
And I find, even in this uh, 2025 era, that there are a number of organizations, some of which I've worked with, who see training as a bit of a tick box exercise.
Mhm.
And, from your experience, how do you move from being seen as a training provider, even if it's an internal training provider, to somebody that has more of a strategic relationship in the organization?
I think there's a couple of things there because I completely agree. And one of the frustrations I've had in a couple of organisations is where people see, let's say, in our industry in fintech, um, yeah, regulatory and compliance is really important, and everybody has to do their mandatory and well, most of them are doing mandatory annual training, and it's like, well, but it's just not working. And for me, something I've really ingrained into the two people I've been working with as part of the team prior to this role was about, so often a business will come to you with, a solution. I want you to do this training. And part of our responsibility is to step back from that and say, well, are we just treating, are we treating a symptom, or is that going to fix the cause? So, for example, in things like anti-money laundering trainings, well, what does the regulator want to achieve? What they really want to achieve is they want to make sure that people know what they should know. Well, making them do an e-learning every year is not going to achieve that. So we've flipped that completely. So now our salespeople, they do quarterly tests, short test, and if they pass the test, that's it. They don't need to do an e-learning. If they fail the test, then they need to do that piece of e-learning, and that's cut down massively on the amount of training that we need to deliver. So it saved the business time, and also we get far more engagement with it because people feel like I'm not doing. Oh, here we go, another piece of e-learning. Let's press the see how fast I can press the forward key. So that's made a big difference. When it comes to sort of being more strategic, I think I'm fortunate at Trust Payments that I've been here a while. I've worked with all of our sales leaders, worked very closely with them, and I've worked with our exco as well, so our executive committee. So I know them. I've got strong relationships with them, and so that's given me probably license um, to make suggestions and recommendations that somebody new into an organisation might have struggled to do. But I guess the key shift from this is about one, I guess, helping them to see the big picture. Or do I understand the big picture? Do I demonstrate? It's a little bit like being a salesperson. Am I a salesperson or am I a trusted advisor? And I want to be seen as a trusted advisor. So I understand what you want to achieve. I understand the goals of the business. I understand what that means from you and your team. And so what I'm doing is I'm coming in and saying, well, I know you need to achieve this. Um, Here's some potential ways that we could do that. But it's very much rather than again training done to by training. It's sponsored by that area of the business. So it's sponsored by commercial, just delivered by us. They own it. The messages that go out, we're very clear about. If any training goes out, the training that explains why we need to do this, the message that goes out has got to come from the business. It doesn't come from training. It comes from the business. So it's like, look, this isn't training doing this to us. I need you to do this. This is the reason why you need to do it. And here's the link. We've just designed it for them. So I think that making sure that I know and I can show them that I understand the big picture and where what we're doing fits into the big picture is a big part of it. But there's also got to be giving them quick wins. So giving them things that they can see, actually, yeah, this is worth doing. And I can already see we've made a difference here. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love working in and with sales, because there's a direct correlation between effort and reward. If you do something and you see sales increase, great. Well, you know that that's working. If it doesn't, then you need to change it to something else.
And thinking about sales teams, as you look forward 12, 18 months, what are some of the capabilities that you think need developing for them to thrive?
Certainly in our organisation, there is still it's a fairly commoditized industry, payment processing. So how do you stand out? What is it you do that make a difference? So there were three things we really honed in on as an organisation to say what's the difference that makes a difference. One of them was products and services, and if it's not the most modern, it needs to be the most stable. So it's got to work, which it does. But also, this is being seen as being experts in the verticals that we play in because of the type of business that we do. we're not like a WorldPay, like I said, or a Global Payments that will go after all of the low risk business that they can compete on a price basis with. We're looking at more exotic lines of business, but we need to demonstrate to them that we understand their business, we understand their challenges. So I think the big thing for us in terms of capability is being able to present themselves as a trusted advisor. I think AI is making information more easy for businesses to obtain information. If they want to know what to do in a certain place, they'll use AI more, but it still needs somebody to be able to interpret that for them, and having to say, well, actually, just because ChatGPT tells me the answer, that doesn't mean. The great thing about ChatGPT is it takes all the information from all over the world. The challenge is it takes information from all over the world. So where's the filtering? Where's the expertise that's still required to know it's the right decision to make? And that's where we're positioning our people. So there's a big part of that. It's important them positioning themselves as being those experts. I think for us is also a frustration that we have as an organisation is about quantifying value and about helping our customers to see the value in a proposition. Somebody in one of the teams shared with me a proposition they'd seen from a competitor. I won't name them. I'll protect the guilty. But this proposal was just shocking. It was so vanilla, and at the end of it, all it was a set of rates. There was no effort there to explain to the customer, actually, if you buy this, it will cost you this, but it will make you that. So there was no rational part of the decision-making process for a customer. So helping our guys to be able to quantify value better and quickly. They need to be able to do it simply because they need to ideally get the customer to do that work. So that's a really big thing for us to focus in on that. And as part of that is also giving them the tools, like I said, the tools and the collateral so that they're able to do that.
Thank you, Lee. And right at the start of this podcast, you shared with us your history. So we know that you've worked across multiple industries, different cultures. What are some of the key lessons that have shaped your leadership philosophy? And is there any advice you wish you'd been given earlier in your career?
Yeah, there is. Probably getting to training earlier would have been one of them, because I really enjoy it. But I guess it's one of those things. Funny how the amount of people that have asked me that advice, younger sort of teenagers, perhaps at school, even my own. I've got 4 children, so they've all gone on through that. And I think it's the Ikigai philosophy is the one which I have discovered more recently, which I love. So find something that you're good at that people will pay you for. That I'm trying to remember the third and fourth one. I think is about that makes a difference.
You love doing.
And that you love doing, that's the one as well. So thank you for filling out that. So that I think from a leadership perspective, the trust equation was one of the biggest learning pieces for me. So that's about as a leader being credible. So do you know what you're talking about? Being consistent. People know what they're going to get from you. So your behaviour on a Monday morning isn't different from a Friday afternoon. You're being consistent with that, but also vulnerable, as in that you're willing to admit that when you make mistakes, because that then invites people to be honest with you about when they're struggling and making mistakes. But that's all got to be wrapped around doing it with genuine intent. You're not doing it to manipulate people. I think that served me incredibly well in my career. In terms of the advice that I was given, there were 2 pieces that stood out to me when I thought about this. When I was working for a training company, it was going brilliantly. I was working with I'd started developing some content for a particular business. And then I got feedback from my boss, from the chief exec of the business, that they didn't want me to deliver that content, which is like, for somebody who quite likes to be liked by people, that was really tough. And my boss saying to me, Lee, what you need to accept that in life, not everybody's going to like you. Now that was easier for him to say, because not there were quite a few people that didn't like him, but for me that was a bit harder. But just not attaching too much personal. Too much of my person to whether I sort of got to do business or not was an important thing. And think finally on that one, when I worked at WorldPay, it was the HR director at WorldPay, a very sort of Papa Smurf, we called him. He was sort of really wise guy. And I can remember there was one thing I was struggling with. So I went to him for advice about a particular skill or behavior that I felt I needed to develop. And he just looked at me and said, "Do you really need to learn this?" And it stopped me in my tracks and thought, well, actually, I probably don't. For what I want to do and achieve in terms of my career, I don't need to learn it. And that sort of really helped me to understand that I don't need to be an expert in everything. And that's helped me a lot, not trying to be able to know the answers to everything. I think it's as Steve Jobs said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I'm comfortable with not being the smartest person in the room.
Me too. It happens quite regularly.
Not even in my own house.
Yeah, and you've got a cat.
Yeah.
Lee, how do we find out more about Trust Payments?
So you go to trustpayments.com.
Perfect.
That's where you'll find us. We're on the internet. Yeah. So if you want to know more about what we do, we process payments.
Very good. Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much. It's been a really interesting conversation. I've enjoyed it. And I look forward to catching up with you for maybe a beer or two before Christmas.
I'm sure we will make that happen.
Sure we will. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of our Sales Podcast Series 3. We hope the insights resonated with you and provoked some thought. If you found value in today's episode, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on expert tips and strategies from our guests across different industries. And remember, Delta Learning is here to help you transform your team's performance in 2025. When you're looking to either build capability or deliver better business results, then please approach us as a potential partner. Visit deltalearning.co.uk to learn more about how we can support your team's growth, or email me steve@deltalearning.co.uk with any questions or just to have a chat to see how we might work together. Thank you.